Hello, welcome back to another episode. I'm very confused, conflicted, not very clear about what I want this show to be like. Because I started it with one intention, right? It was supposed to be some kind of journal, diary, recount, stuff that happened in my life, be it deeply personal. But, maybe starting it at that point, I just didn't feel I felt like I wanted to do that as a way to capitalize, create something unique. And that is still something I want to do, but I don't think I want to do it in that way. Because now that past the initial idea, given some time has passed, I don't really like and love um, really just sharing a lot about my personal life. I don't know if that's something that should be out there to be used even just by me as like some kind of prop, make the podcast more unique. I should be doing it because I actually want to share it. And that clearly at this moment is probably not something I want to do because whenever I think back of those first few episodes, especially the ones where I was very emotional, talking about the relationship and stuff, it's very clear that I don't actually be very embarrassed if people actually listen. Right? And I think the podcast, anything I do, should be something where maybe I don't have to share it right away. It doesn't have to be public, but it should be something that I'm proud of and something that I could share. And really, those two things, it could be very cool, very candid, and that's probably what I was thinking when I was starting it. It's a very unique thing to do to talk about your feelings, but perhaps, not perhaps, for certain, right now, I don't think I'm at that stage in my life where I actually believe that. And right now, I'm more of just, um, you know, I want to do things that are interesting, but I think I should keep my personal life stuff out of it. The other thing that I originally had when starting this was, right, this is going to be like journal and diary, but not just for myself, it's for the people listening. And specifically, one of those people I listed was perhaps a child in the future if I did have a child. And you know what? You can still listen to this, and I hope you gain something out of this. I hope this is not for naught, but I think I'm going to transition this to less of a personal thing and more of just making an episode when I actually have thoughts that I think are interesting enough to share. Um, Something that I want to discuss that I think would be cool to get perhaps different perspectives on, just something that, you know, some events that happen in life and prompt questions to form in my head. So, that long prelude aside, what was the reason for today's episode? Well, today's episode is because I was very rattled yesterday. And what was I rattled about? Well, you might think it's a stupid thing, but what happened was I was playing pickup games of a video game that I really enjoy called Team Fortress 2. And there was this player who perhaps I'll name later. I mean, I don't even know his real name, of course, so it's not really like gonna matter if I dox or whatever. But we'll keep him unnamed for now. And we were assigned onto the same team. A little bit of context: I usually play pickup games in this one community server on Discord. And usually, after playing for around a month now, I've gotten more familiar, recognize like a lot of the names that often come up in that server. So most of the people there, I know how they act and I know how the games are gonna go. And I'm like, okay, yeah, these people, they're not bad, you know. perhaps I don't always vibe with all of them, but at least they're not people that really grind my gears and cause me to make a video or a episode like this, right? So I was in a different server for this one time, which is funny because the server was called One Time Pugs, and this player, it's got a whole like this server's got a whole new cast of people that I'm usually not very familiar with. So there's this one player that's on my team, and we're playing in the game. And basically, after the first round, we're not doing great. And this guy just starts being passive aggressive as hell and shit talking not just me, he was actually shit talking like one or one of the other players first. Since we basically our team composition is a team size of 6, and there are around 3 people that are very vocally active, 3, and then there was me and like this one other guy who weren't very vocally active, but we still like gave our comms. Just we weren't talking the entire freaking time as he was. And then there was one person who I guess was muted or just never talked or doesn't like using their microphone, which I don't blame him or her because they would have just gotten abused by this stupid ass. But either way, I think he sounded off on this one person who wasn't really talking much first. And it's not even in a constructive way where things could change. The way he was complaining, right, is what people often resort to first, which is just complaining through illusion, through passive aggressiveness. Like saying, oh, why didn't, I guess this is what happens when we have bad players or when our flank isn't watching this. That's how things happen. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Stuff like that, right? And he was sounding off on that. And throughout the match, as we kept losing, because our team really wasn't that good, um, we just kept losing. And then he started shifting the focus of his ire to just a bunch of people. Yeah? Like to me and to one of the other players as well. And it was just not a fun time because this player is just a toxic individual. And it's not very fun to play with toxic individuals. And one of the other players there, as I said, there were like 3 people that were calming along. One of them was probably the biggest yes man I've met in a while. Where basically, whenever this person was complaining about things happening in the team in a broad stroke, he was like, oh, I wasn't doing that. I was trying my best doing this. And it was like trying his best to just stay out of the sightline, the anger sightline of this one person in a very, honestly to me, cowardice way. Like, just how are you tolerating? Do you like this guy so much that you're just gonna tolerate this kind of stuff that he says, getting so tilted, not really speak out at all? So it got to a point where he was specifically flaming me because he was just in this situation where I came in late to a fight that he's having. He died in the game, and then I killed like the person who killed him. And then he was like, "Oh, of course, our soldier here, bumbling around, of course, doesn't call out, blah 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 blah." And I responded with like, are you that much of a dumbass that you don't see I'm not even in the doorway? I can't see him. Right? Just trying to set the situation because this guy was clearly so mentally shot that he wasn't using his brain at all to actually think about facts that were happening in front of him. And basically, I snapped back at him. And after that, I just stopped even indulging in him. I didn't talk to him at all. And the hug happened. He got more tilted. He kept doing this abusive stuff. And it was just not a very pleasant time for anybody involved, even the people that weren't really specifically getting flamed by him. So, why did I make an episode here? Well, I said I was rattled, right? I thought at first that I would be able to handle this kind of situation quite well. You know, these past few years, or maybe just since a certain time in high school, I just felt like, okay, I've gone through so much. I feel like I'm very emotionally and mentally strong, and I won't get rattled by anything. I won't be stressed unnecessarily. I know strategies to make sure that I can perform at my best no matter the circumstance, right? I can do what needs to be done no matter how difficult it could be, and no matter how, as I said, stressing the environment is. And this was something that I guess I internally prided myself on. And I feel like every time events like this happen, it just completely shatters that illusion because I really am not that mentally tough, I don't think, if I got rattled so much by this person. And let me explain what I mean by rattled. Why do I think that I was actually rattled? Why am I saying that I was rattled? Well, after this match, right, I think a mentally strong person who actually doesn't care, right, that things like this happen and just like move on, this guy's an idiot. They just move on and think this guy's an idiot. That clearly didn't happen with me because after that, I was in my little own state of annoyance where I was like, I can't believe this guy was doing this kind of stuff. Next time I see him, how am I going to pay him back? And that's just a not mentally strong thing to do, a rattled thing to do. Because clearly, if I was not rattled, this wouldn't affect me, and I wouldn't even think about this guy anymore. But I was thinking about, damn, I should have said this to him back then. And next time I see him, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna react to how this guy treats people again? It's the same team. And I was like, that was what I was thinking for longer than I want to say, like a good amount of time. And even when I was gonna sleep later that night, I had a hard time falling asleep. Not mostly because of this, but this was a thing that was being thought by me. I was laying in bed and I was thinking of these comebacks and what am I gonna tell this guy if I see him again? So clearly, very rattled, right? And I think the reason I want to make this episode, besides just spelling it out, is this how do you overcome this? What is the point? And is this something that is unavoidable? If you feel strongly about something, it's going to keep you up. And this was clearly something that was keeping me up at night yesterday. I had other things I really wanted to think about, but this was also something that was just floating around in my head. So it clearly had some kind of significance. If it was staying around in my mind for so long. So the question is like, how do you actually even overcome this? How do you develop mental strength? And one of the strategies that I always felt was most effective for really building any kind of skill was failing over and over again at something. But the failure is practice. Each time you just learn slowly and slowly, like how to do it better by doing small little adaptations in your behavior. So each time you just change one little thing, and then as human beings, as scientific creatures, we're always conducting these experiments. We're making hypotheses on what we're trying to change, and this is probably the reason why it wasn't working. And then we do the experiment, we try it again, we fail again, and we're like, okay, this is the reason why it wasn't working. And then we do it again, and then we change something else, and then this time we get better results, and we're like, okay, perhaps this one is more influential in affecting how things happen. So, with all of that, that means the way to get better at developing mental strength is to go into the most toxic environments and be exposed to this behavior more and more so that you then learn how to deal with it better. Now, what I'm saying is that makes sense. And I have no doubt that that would actually be very effective in giving me, first of all, thicker skin so I wouldn't be so rattled, but also in helping me develop the mental strength so that I wouldn't even be rattled at the start and I know what to say and be better at standing up for myself instead of just doing that one time because I really feel like I did it that one time. Then afterwards, those thoughts afterwards, I was like, I should have said more. Oh, I had such a good comeback. I would have done this. But in the moment, if you don't do it, you really are just not actually sticking up for yourself. And I really was not the hotshot mental strength master that I originally thought I was. But I guess the point is, while that strategy is undoubtedly, I believe, effective, is this the best way to develop mental strength? Perhaps there are other ways to circumvent when these kinds of situations happen, and perhaps there are different ways and types of mental strength. The type of mental strength I was talking about there that would be developed from constant exposure would be the kind of dullness where you experience the same thing over and over again to the point where it's not special anymore because you've seen it so many times and it just becomes a normal occurrence. Is this the right way to do it? Because in essence, if we treat this kind of behavior like that and just think of it as something normal and that we should expect, well, as the name implies, then we're just normalizing this kind of toxic behavior and we're being like, yeah, he can do it, but I have developed the thicker skin. I feel like that's something that a lot of gamers adopt. A very ingrained part of gaming culture where it's like, grow thick skin, you're going to hear a lot of abuse. No matter how or what kind of abuse that is, you just have to learn to sustain it, move on, maybe even dish it back yourself, defend yourself that way. And I think as I grow older and older, I don't even know if it's just growing older and older, but just learning about more perspectives where people are like, is that really the best way? Why is fighting toxicity with silence and indifference the best way to kill it? Is it not better to actually try and tackle the problem instead of ignoring it? And I think the more experiences that I've had where I've learned that ignoring problems and just trying to have them go away or develop coping mechanisms around this, because in essence this is a coping mechanism. You're not stopping the person from being toxic anymore, you're just adapting yourself to deal with it and not really have it affect you, right? I think it's better to actually try and target the source. But this doesn't really work in terms of what I was talking about, right? Because this means while you're talking with these people, you're trying to get them to change. And really, on the internet, this is always going to be a difficult thing because people are not on there to be like vessels of change where people's opinions sway them. Just having a conversation will make them change how they interact and talk with others. And it's always a slow, gradual process if some kind of change is actually going to happen. You need to be exposed to something over and over ago, just like the negative reinforcement of ignoring a problem, but in a positive way of being like, okay, this isn't the right way to do it. I'm seeing other people that are dealing with this situation in a better way. We should do it that way instead. And all that takes time. And usually you just don't have that on an internet. So it's kind of a difficult thing to do. So how do you develop mental strength? feel like developing mental strength is a very self thing you can do, something to improve yourself. And really, I don't think I had any ideas where I was trying to go with this video. I just wanted to talk about it and how rattled I was and how the kinds of thoughts I was thinking about after this situation happened. I'm like, how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? Well, and the solutions that he came up were being more proactive and helping cultivate environments where this doesn't happen, being more supportive, but that's very difficult, and I think it's a two-way solution where while this is all lovey-dovey and very nice thing to do, have a more positive environment, it's just going to be very difficult to do. And while you can try your best, you actually want to protect yourself and be able to be stronger in these situations and not be so easily battled than the old kind of approach, as I said, where you just have to be exposed to it over and over again and slowly adapt, is really going to be the only way to develop a way to not be rattled and to actually have good mental strength in terms of not letting other people get under your skin. This is what I think now, December 16th, 2022. And I'm sure that in a couple years, couple months, perhaps even weeks, when I have another situation that is in the same vein as this, I'll have some new insights, and then I will share it with you all.